You were taught to read sacred words with fear, to obey without questioning, to believe that truth was fragile and that asking too much would somehow place you in danger. That alone should have made you pause. Truth does not tremble when questioned, only control does. Something essential was quietly removed not from paper alone, but from understanding. And when understanding is taken, obedience becomes easier, not because people are wicked, but because they are tired, searching, and willing to trust whoever claims authority. Many sincere souls have felt it, a sense that something doesn't quite add up, verses that comfort but do not empower, teachings that promise salvation later, while discouraging authority now. The unease you felt was not rebellion. It was intuition knocking. You see, spiritual truth was never meant to make you small. It was never designed to weaken your will or outsource your power. Yet generation after generation was taught to bow inwardly, to doubt themselves, to wait for permission from outside. Fear became holy, poverty became virtuous, suffering became proof of devotion, and anyone who spoke of inner authority was labeled dangerous, prideful, or deceived. But ask yourself, who benefits when believers forget who they are? There is a reason certain ideas were softened, reworded, or buried under interpretation, not because they were false, but because they were effective. Effective people are difficult to rule. Empowered minds do not submit easily. You were never meant to live at the mercy of chance, fate, or punishment. The original message spoke of alignment, of command, of the spoken word shaping reality. But that kind of truth requires responsibility, and responsibility was inconvenient. Instead, many were taught to beg where they could have spoken, to wait where they could have moved, to plead where they could have known. Over time, belief replaced knowing, and belief without understanding becomes fragile. The most dangerous lie is not spoken outright, it is implied. It is the suggestion that you are powerless without intermediaries, that good is scarce, that life is something happening to you rather than responding through you. Control does not arrive loudly. It arrives gently wrapped in tradition, repetition, and fear of being wrong. And soon, questioning feels sinful, while obedience feels safe. But safety built on ignorance is never peace. You may have wondered why certain teachings feel incomplete, why prayer sometimes feels like shouting into silence, why devotion does not always translate into transformation. It is not because you lack faith. It is because something vital was withheld. The original truth did not ask you to deny the world. It taught you how to shape it from within. It did not glorify suffering. It explained how suffering dissolves when law is understood. Words were once known as creative instruments. Thought was recognized as cause. Inner agreement was understood as destiny. But when these ideas are removed, the follower remains dependent, and dependence is easy to manage. This is not about attacking faith, it is about restoring it to its original strength. Faith was never meant to make you obedient, it was meant to make you awake. If you have ever felt a quiet anger beneath your devotion, a sense of betrayal you couldn't name, it is because something within you remembers. Truth leaves an echo. Even when buried, it vibrates. The most obedient believers were often the most exhausted, tired of waiting, tired of being told their reward was always later, tired of hearing that struggle was noble while authority was dangerous. But what if the real danger was never truth, but people discovering it? What if the most important teachings were not destroyed, but simply discouraged, labeled mystical, removed from sermons, left out of explanations? Because a truth you never hear is a truth you never apply. This is why reclaiming understanding feels threatening to systems built on control. Empowerment does not kneel easily. Inner authority cannot be taxed, monitored, or managed. And yet, the truth has always been patient, waiting for those ready to see without fear, to listen without trembling, to remember without rebellion. You are not being asked to abandon faith, you are being invited to complete it. When you understand what was removed not from pages, but from meaning, you will see why so many were sincere yet stuck, devout yet defeated, faithful yet fearful. Stay with this message, not to be convinced but to remember, because once truth is seen clearly, it cannot be unseen, and once inner authority is restored, no outer lie can hold you. What was hidden was not meant to be hidden forever, and what was taken can be reclaimed quietly, powerfully, and without permission. I would like to begin by saying something which may at first sound surprising, yet which brings great peace when it is truly understood. Nothing essential was ever destroyed. Truth cannot be destroyed. It can be hidden beneath misunderstanding, buried beneath fear, or weakened through misinterpretation, but it cannot be erased. The difficulty has never been the sacred words themselves, but the way they were explained, emphasized, and applied. Many sincere people have believed that something vital was taken from the scriptures, and in a sense they are correct. What was removed was not ink upon parchment, but understanding within the mind. And when understanding is taken, obedience becomes easier, not because people are foolish, but because they are uncertain. An uncertain mind looks outward for authority. A certain mind listens within. The earliest teachings were never meant to make man small. They were not designed to weaken his will or place him forever in the posture of a beggar. They were instructions in law. They revealed how life works, how thought precedes experience, and how man cooperates with divine intelligence rather than pleading with it. When these teachings were softened or stripped of their meaning, faith became fragile, and fear quietly took its place. Truth does not tremble when questioned, only misunderstanding does. A law does not fear examination, for examination reveals its consistency. Yet many were taught to fear inquiry, to believe that asking too much was dangerous, that seeking understanding was prideful. In this way, obedience replaced knowing, and repetition replaced realization. I have often noticed that people who are told not to question grow weary. Even when they are devoted, they pray faithfully, attend faithfully, and obey faithfully, yet feel an unspoken emptiness. They sense that something is missing, though they cannot name it. This unease is not rebellion, it is intuition. It is the soul remembering something it once knew. Sacred teachings were originally practical. They were not meant to be admired from a distance or postponed to another world. They were instructions for living here and now. They explained cause and effect. They showed how inner agreement produces outer form. But when these ideas were reduced to promises of reward later, power was removed from the present moment. Many were taught that poverty was virtuous, that suffering was proof of devotion, and that authority belonged elsewhere. Fear was sanctified, while confidence was discouraged. Yet fear has never been holy. Fear is simply faith pointed in the wrong direction. And faith, whether toward good or harm, must produce according to its direction. I do not say these things to weaken faith, but to restore it. For faith was never meant to make man passive. It was meant to awaken him. It was meant to give him eyes to see and ears to hear. When faith is stripped of understanding, it becomes a fragile thing, easily shaken by circumstance. When faith is joined with law, it becomes unmovable. The scriptures themselves give countless examples of men and women who understood this. They did not merely endure life. They cooperated with it. They spoke words with authority. They acted in expectation. They moved when guided. They did not wait helplessly for rescue. They aligned themselves with order. Consider how often Jesus spoke in terms of law rather than appeal. He did not say, "Perhaps this may change." He said, "Be thou made whole." He did not beg circumstances to alter. He commanded from understanding. Yet over time, command was softened into request, and authority was placed outside the believer rather than within alignment. When man is taught that good must always be delayed, that reward is always later, he becomes tired. When he is taught that struggle is noble and ease is suspicious, he becomes strained. Strain appears only when man resists law or misunderstands it. Many sincere believers have lived their entire lives waiting for permission, waiting for worthiness, waiting for a future reward, while the law they needed was already operating in their thoughts and words. They were creating all along, yet were taught to believe they were powerless. This is the quiet tragedy of misunderstanding. Control does not arrive loudly. It arrives gently, through repetition and fear of being wrong. When people are taught that authority is dangerous and submission is safe, they trade knowing for believing, and believing without understanding becomes fragile. I have known people who were deeply devoted, yet anxious, faithful, yet fearful. They wondered why prayer sometimes felt like shouting into silence. They blamed themselves for lack of faith, not knowing that faith without understanding is easily exhausted. The fault was never devotion. It was incompleteness. The original teachings did not glorify suffering. They explained how suffering dissolves when law is understood. They did not deny hardship, but they did not worship it either. They showed how harmony is restored through alignment, not endurance. When truth is reduced to comfort alone, it loses its transforming power. Comfort is kind, but understanding is freeing. The soul longs not only to be consoled, but to be instructed. And when instruction is withheld, the soul grows restless. It was against misunderstanding. Truth leaves an echo. Even when buried, it vibrates. The soul recognizes it instinctively. You were never meant to live at the mercy of chance, fate, or punishment. Life is not arbitrary. It is lawful. And law, once understood, removes fear. Fear thrives only in confusion. The most obedient believers were often the most exhausted. They tried to obey rules they did not understand. They tried to live by promises they could not apply. They were told that questioning was dangerous, yet silence never brought peace. Understanding would have. What was removed, then, was not scripture, but explanation, not faith, but authority, not devotion, but participation. And participation is what restores power. You are not being asked to abandon reverence. You are being invited to deepen it. For reverence without understanding produces fear, while reverence joined with knowledge produces confidence. As you listen, you may feel something settle rather than stir. Truth does not agitate the soul. It steadies it. When something long forgotten is remembered, there is relief, not rebellion. This remembering does not require anger or accusation. It requires clarity, and clarity restores what fear concealed. For once you see that nothing essential was destroyed, only obscured, you are ready to look again, not with trembling, but with understanding. And it is understanding that we must now restore, step by step, beginning with the truth about thought itself, and why inner authority was quietly softened over time. For as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he was never meant to be poetry alone. It was instruction. And to that instruction, we now return. I would like now to speak of a sentence so simple, so direct, that it was never meant to require interpretation. Yet over time, it was softened, spiritualized, and set safely beyond practical use. The sentence is this: As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. This was not written as poetry, nor as comfort, nor as moral encouragement. It was written as law. And when law is mistaken for symbolism, power is lost. In its original understanding, this statement placed responsibility squarely within the individual. It revealed that life does not happen at random, nor is it handed out according to favor or punishment. Life responds to inner agreement. What a man consistently accepts as true within himself becomes the mold into which his experience is poured. This is a difficult truth for those who wish to place cause outside themselves, but it is a liberating truth for those ready to be free. Over time, this idea became uncomfortable. If thought is cause, then fear is creative. If belief shapes experience, then suffering is not imposed, but allowed. Such understanding requires maturity. It requires responsibility. And responsibility is not always welcome. It is far easier to believe that circumstances rule, that fate decides, or that authority rests elsewhere. Thus, the emphasis quietly shifted. Instead of teaching believers how to govern thought, they were taught to distrust it. The mind became something to suppress rather than to discipline. Confidence was mistaken for arrogance. Inner certainty was mistaken for pride. And fear of being wrong, fear of offending, fear of stepping beyond permission was sanctified. Yet fear has never been a fruit of truth. Fear is the result of misunderstanding. Divine mind does not create confusion, nor does it weaken its own expression. Man was never meant to live divided, praying for good while expecting harm. Such division produces exhaustion. I have known many people who were devout, sincere, and diligent, yet constantly anxious. They believed deeply, yet trusted little. They prayed, yet worried. They asked for guidance, yet doubted their own perception. This state was not humility, it was uncertainty, and uncertainty weakens authority. When inner authority is discouraged, outer authority grows. When people are taught that they cannot trust their own understanding, they must rely on interpretation. Interpretation replaces instruction, and instruction in law is what produces results. The scriptures themselves are filled with examples of men who understood this law. They did not plead endlessly. They aligned themselves inwardly and acted outwardly. They expected results because they understood cause. They were not reckless. They were certain. Consider the calm authority with which truth was spoken. There was no trembling, no apology. According to your faith be it unto you. Faith, in this sense, was not hope. It was inner agreement. An agreement produces form. But when faith was reduced to belief without understanding, it became fragile. Belief can waver. Understanding stands. Belief asks, will it work? Understanding knows that law always works. Many were taught that questioning their thoughts was dangerous, that the mind was untrustworthy. Yet an undisciplined mind is untrustworthy, not a disciplined one. The solution was never suppression, but education. Thought was meant to be trained, not feared. When a man is taught that his thoughts have no power, he becomes careless with them. He allows worry, resentment, and fear to circulate freely, and then he wonders why life feels heavy. Life is responding faithfully. I once knew a woman who lived in constant anxiety, though she prayed daily. She believed her worry was a sign of care and responsibility. When she learned that her anxious thoughts were shaping her experience, she was astonished. She said, I thought only my prayers mattered. When she learned to govern her inner conversation, peace returned, and with it, order. This is why repetition was always emphasized in the original teaching. Not repetition of ritual, but repetition of truth. Thought patterns are not changed by wishing, they are changed by replacement. Each time a fearful thought is replaced with a statement of truth, authority is restored. I often give this statement to those who feel overwhelmed. I think the thoughts of God, therefore I manifest harmony. This is not imagination, it is alignment. Divine mind knows order. When man aligns with it, order appears. As this understanding returns, the listener begins to stand differently. There is less apology in the voice, less hurry in movement. Decisions become simpler. Doubt no longer dominates. Others sense this change immediately. Confidence is not loud. It is steady. Many systems benefit when people believe they are powerless. Powerless people are easier to direct. But divine law was never meant to create dependence. It was meant to create cooperation. Man was designed to work with law, not beneath it. This does not make man separate from God. It makes him an expression of God. The branch does not compete with the vine. It expresses it. When this relationship is misunderstood, either pride or fear appears. When it is understood, balance returns. The most dangerous misunderstanding is the belief that surrender means passivity. True surrender aligns thought with truth. It does not abandon responsibility. It clarifies it. When man aligns his thinking with divine order, effort becomes effortless. As this truth settles in the mind, old fears begin to loosen. The listener may notice that worry no longer feels necessary. There is a sense that life is not hostile, but orderly. This is not blindness. It is understanding. Thought governed by truth produces visible results. Circumstances shift. Opportunities appear. Health responds. Relationships soften. This is not coincidence. It is law in motion. Repetition remains essential. A single insight does not undo years of habit. Truth must be spoken until it becomes natural. These affirmations are powerful when used faithfully. My mind is governed by divine intelligence. I expect good, and good comes. I think clearly, and my way is made plain. As these ideas take root, the believer no longer feels small. He does not feel rebellious either. He feels steady. Faith becomes something lived, not something defended. And as inner authority is restored through right thinking, the next piece of understanding naturally returns the understanding that thought, once aligned, must be spoken. For it is through the spoken word that inner agreement is set in motion, and it is the spoken word that was most carefully softened, misunderstood, and reduced. For, in the beginning was the Word, was never meant to describe history alone. It described process, and it is to that process we must now turn. Having seen that thought itself is creative, and that inner agreement shapes experience, we must now turn to the instrument through which thought is set in motion. That instrument is the spoken word. Few truths were ever more plainly stated, and few have been more carefully misunderstood. In the beginning was the Word. This was not written merely to describe the dawn of creation. It was written to explain how creation continues. The Word was never meant to be understood as sound alone, nor as prayer alone, nor as confession alone. The Word is the outward movement of inner agreement. It is thought released into action. When spoken with conviction, it becomes law. When spoken carelessly, it becomes limitation. The word is neutral, obedient, and exact. It does not argue. It fulfills, over time. The spoken word was moralized rather than understood. People were taught that speech mattered because it was polite, or reverent, or respectful. Rarely were they taught that speech mattered because it was creative. Words became social instruments instead of spiritual tools, and so people prayed endlessly, yet spoke fearfully. They asked for good, yet described lack. The law responded to the stronger command. I have often said, your word is your wand. This is not imagination. It is observation. A wand is an instrument of direction. It does not create power. It directs it. In the same way, words do not create substance. They direct it. Thought supplies the pattern. Word releases it into form. Many sincere believers were taught to pray about conditions instead of speaking to them. They described their problems in great detail, believing honesty was humility. Yet every description impressed the subconscious with the image of the difficulty. Life, obedient and exact, continued to reproduce it. I once knew a woman who prayed daily for prosperity, yet spoke constantly of high prices and hard times. She believed she was being realistic. When she learned that her words were neutralizing her prayers, she was astonished. She began to discipline her speech. She refused to name lack. She affirmed quietly, "My supply comes from God." Within a short time, conditions changed. The prayer had always been heard. The speech had been contradicting it. The scriptures give clear instruction in this matter. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. This was not written as warning alone, but as explanation. The tongue directs life. Yet this verse was often softened into moral advice rather than practical law. Many people were taught to fear their words, but not to use them. Fear of error replaced understanding of power, and fear always weakens. When man fears his own authority, he surrenders it. The spoken word is the bridge between the unseen and the seen. Thought remains potential until word sets it in motion. This is why silent belief often produces little, while spoken conviction produces swift results. The word completes the circuit. I have known men and women whose affairs were transformed almost overnight when they changed their speech. Not because they shouted affirmations endlessly, but because they spoke with inner agreement. Words spoken without belief are empty. Words spoken with belief are law. A man once came to me deeply discouraged. He said, "Nothing ever works for me." He had said it so often that it had become a decree. I asked him to reverse it, not with force, but with persistence. He began to say, "Everything works in my favor." At first, he did not believe it, but repetition softened resistance. Soon, belief followed. Opportunities appeared. The boomerang returned bearing a new order. Words spoken in jest are often more dangerous than words spoken in seriousness, for they are repeated without watchfulness. Many people joke themselves into misfortune and then wonder why life seems unkind. The subconscious does not laugh. It obeys. This is why the watchman at the gate of the mind must also guard the gate of speech. Careless words undo careful thinking. Speech must be disciplined, not strained. One does not need to speak constantly, but one must speak wisely. Silence is often more powerful than explanation. When man refrains from naming what he does not desire, he starves it. When he names what he does desire, he feeds it. The law responds faithfully. The boomerang law of words is exact. What is spoken returns multiplied. If man speaks criticism, criticism returns. If he speaks resentment, resentment meets him in new forms. If he speaks blessing, blessing returns enlarged. I have seen envy dissolve fortunes and blessing restore them. A woman once felt bitter over another's success. She did not speak it aloud, yet she rehearsed it inwardly. Her own affairs stagnated. When she learned to bless instead, affirming, "What God has done for others, He now does for me and more," the stagnation ended. Prosperity returned. The word had changed direction. Words spoken in moments of fear carry unusual power. Fear charges speech with urgency. Many a man has spoken disaster into being in a single moment of discouragement. Yet the law of forgiveness is merciful. A mistaken word may be neutralized by a word of truth spoken with equal conviction. I often give this statement when fear has spoken. I now neutralize every destructive word I have spoken, and I set in motion the law of good. This is not denial, it is correction. The subconscious responds willingly to clear instruction. The spoken word also governs health. Many speak illness into the body by constant reference to it. They name it, describe it, and expect it. The body obeys. When speech changes, the body responds. I once knew a woman who had been called delicate since childhood. She accepted the label and repeated it. When she learned to say, I am strong, whole, and perfectly sustained, and refused the old description, her strength returned. The law simply followed a new command. Words spoken about the future are especially powerful. When a man says, I know this will fail, he prepares failure. When he says, I expect good, he prepares success. Expectation spoken aloud becomes prophecy. Many were taught that humility meant lowering expectation. In truth, humility means alignment with truth, and truth is abundant. To expect good is not arrogance, it is obedience to law. Others notice when a person's speech changes. The voice becomes steady, complaints disappear, confidence replaces explanation. People respond differently, employers trust, friends rely, authority becomes visible, repetition is essential. Old speech patterns do not dissolve instantly, they dissolve through replacement. Each repetition of truth weakens the old command and strengthens the new. This is how law is applied. I often suggest beginning the day with a few simple statements spoken with feeling. Only good comes to me, for I speak only good. My word goes forth and prospers. These statements set the tone and guard against careless speech. As man becomes watchful of his words, life becomes kinder. It has always been kind, but now is kindness. Kindness is recognized. The world has not changed. The command has. When the spoken word is understood and respected, prayer becomes effective, faith becomes practical, and belief becomes knowing. The believer no longer feels dependent or small. And when speech is aligned with right thinking, the next truth naturally reveals itself that life is not random, nor competitive, nor punitive, but designed. For words spoken from alignment lead man to his right place, his right work, and his perfect self-expression. It is to this truth of divine design, and how it was quietly overshadowed by submission and endurance, that we must now turn. When the power of thought and the authority of the spoken word are understood, the soul is ready to receive another truth which was never removed from Scripture, yet was quietly weakened through misunderstanding. This truth is divine design. Life was never meant to be endured blindly, nor was man meant to submit passively to confusion. There is a plan for every life, and that plan is orderly, intelligent, and kind. When this truth is lost, men call fate cruel and life uncertain. When it is restored, peace returns. Many sincere believers were taught that God's will was mysterious, unpredictable, and often painful. They were told that suffering was a sign of devotion and that endurance was more holy than understanding. Yet divine mind does not work through chaos. Order is its nature. Confusion appears only when man resists or misunderstands the law. Divine design does not mean that every event is pleasant, but it does mean that every event has purpose. Nothing is accidental. Nothing is wasted. When man understands this, he ceases to feel victimized by circumstance. He begins to look for direction instead of blame. This single shift restores dignity. I have often said that there is a place prepared for every man, and that place carries with it recognition, supply, and protection. Yet many live in anxiety because they fear missing their good. They believe opportunity is scarce, that another may take what belongs to them, or that time has passed them by. These fears arise only when divine design is forgotten. No one can take from you what belongs to you by divine right. This is not comfort, it is law. If something passes out of your life, it was never part of your true supply. If it is yours, it is guarded by divine order. This understanding dissolves envy, competition, and hurry. Much suffering has come from imitation. People admire another's success and believe they must follow the same path. Yet what is right for one may be bondage for another. When a man turns away from his own guidance to copy another's life, he steps out of the current. Fatigue, dissatisfaction, and confusion follow. I once knew a woman who greatly admired a friend's career and tried to force herself into the same line of work. Though she worked diligently, she felt constantly drained. When she finally released personal will and affirmed, "I have a wonderful work, in a wonderful way. I give wonderful service, for wonderful pay," her direction changed. Opportunities appeared which suited her nature perfectly, and success came with ease. She said, "I did not know work could feel so natural." She had found her place. Perfect self-expression never exhausts. It renews. When a man is in his right place, his strength increases. When he is in the wrong place, no amount of effort can sustain him. Many call this tiredness, weakness, or lack of discipline. Envy is the surest sign that divine design has been forgotten. When a man envies another's success, he is saying inwardly, "There is not enough for us both." This belief closes his own channel. When he blesses another's success, he affirms abundance, and abundance must respond. I have seen this law work with precision. A woman once came to me distressed because a friend had received a fine gift while she had received none. I gave her this affirmation: "What God has done for others, He now does for me, and more." She repeated it faithfully, though at first it felt forced. Soon resentment dissolved, and shortly afterward she received an exact duplicate of the gift, and more besides. The law had simply responded to her change of consciousness. Divine design also governs timing. Many say, "I am too late," or "My opportunity has passed." These words deny law. There is no delay in divine mind. When man is aligned, his opportunity appears at the appointed hour. When he is not aligned, he may stand before an open door and not recognize it. I once knew a man who believed he had missed his chance in life. He repeated the story until it became fixed belief. When he learned to say, "Now is the appointed time. Today is the day of my amazing good fortune," his outlook changed. Soon afterward, he was offered a position perfectly suited to him, though others considered him past the favorable age. Divine design is not bound by human calendars. Recognition also follows this law. Many struggle to be seen, to be appreciated, to be acknowledged. They explain themselves endlessly, defend their actions, and push for attention, yet recognition never comes through insistence. When a man is in his right place, others recognize him naturally. I have observed that truly successful people do not speak much about success. They are absorbed in what they are doing. They enjoy their work. They give freely of themselves. This enjoyment opens the secret door. Interest is magnetic. Joy attracts attention without effort. Living in divine design frees man from comparison. He no longer measures his progress against another's. He understands that each soul moves according to its own rhythm. He walks steadily, without hurry, and without fear. This steadiness gives dignity. Others sense it and respect it. Relationships are also governed by this law. No relationship, which is truly ordained, can be lost. When a person fears loss, he clings, and clinging repels. When he trusts divine design, he releases, and release attracts. Only that which does not belong falls away. I have known people who remained in unhappy conditions because they feared nothing better would come. This fear assumed that good was accidental. But good is designed. When one lets go of what is wrong, one makes room for what is right. There is no loss in divine mind. This statement is powerful when fear of loss arises. There is no loss in divine mind. Therefore, I cannot lose. When spoken with conviction, it restores peace. The subconscious responds by rearranging conditions in harmony with the truth. Divine design does not usually reveal the entire plan at once. Often only the next step is shown. This requires faith. Those who demand to see the whole path before moving remain stationary. Those who obey the step they are given are led onward, step by step, into security. The scriptures tell us that the steps of a good man are ordered. They do not say the entire journey is explained. Order is revealed through movement. Stillness of fear must precede movement of faith. As man aligns with divine design, his manner changes. He is no longer apologetic. He no longer begs for opportunity. He expects cooperation. Others respond to this expectation. They feel confidence in him. They trust his decisions. Authority grows quietly. I have seen people transformed when they stopped saying, "I must make this work," and began to say, "I desire only that which is mine by divine right." This single shift dissolves struggle. The law responds instantly to surrender. Repetition is essential in establishing this understanding. Old habits of fear and comparison must be replaced. These affirmations are helpful when used faithfully. I am in my right place, at the right time. I cannot miss my divine appointment. What is mine comes to me easily. As these truths are impressed upon the subconscious, doubt fades. Man begins to trust himself not from pride, but from alignment. He listens more carefully. He chooses more wisely. He feels guided rather than driven. When divine design is understood, life ceases to feel accidental. Each experience is seen as preparation. Even apparent detours reveal their purpose. Man no longer asks, "Why did this happen to me?" but, "Where is this leading me?" And that question opens the way. This understanding prepares the soul for the next great truth. For even divine design cannot be followed without guidance. And guidance does not come from argument or authority outside, but from the still, small voice within. It is to this magic path of intuition, so often feared and discouraged, that we must now turn. When a man understands that his life is designed and that his place is prepared, he must then learn how that design is revealed from moment to moment. For divine design is not followed by guesswork, nor is it discovered through argument. It is revealed through intuition, the still, small voice within. This faculty was never meant to be feared or ignored, yet over time, it was quietly discouraged. For an intuitive man is difficult to control. Intuition is not imagination, nor is it impulse. It is divine intelligence speaking directly to the individual. It is calm, precise, and unemotional. It does not shout or plead. It simply knows. When man trusts this inner knowing, he moves in safety. When he ignores it, he wanders, even while appearing outwardly obedient. Many were taught to distrust their own perception. They were told that guidance must always come from outside, from authority, from tradition, from instruction. In doing so, they were cut off from the very channel through which divine mind leads its expression. The result was confusion without explanation and obedience without direction. The scriptures are filled with examples of intuitive guidance. Abraham was not given a map. He was told to go forth. Moses did not reason with the Red Sea. He moved when commanded. Joseph followed inner guidance even when appearances contradicted it. These men were not reckless. They were obedient to law. Intuition does not require explanation before action. Reason demands proof. Intuition creates it. This is why so many sincere people remain stuck. They wait to see the whole path before taking the first step. Yet the way appears only as one moves. I have known many who prayed for guidance yet continued to argue inwardly. They asked, "Is this right?" and then listed reasons it could not be. In doing so, they silenced the answer. Intuition cannot speak over fear. It waits for stillness. I often say that prayer is telephoning to God, and intuition is God telephoning to you. Prayer prepares the mind. Intuition directs it. But if the line is busy with worry, resentment, or hurry, the message cannot come through. One woman once came to me in great distress over money. She had prayed fervently and reasoned endlessly. Nothing changed. One day she felt a quiet urge to take a walk she never took. There was no logic in it, yet she obeyed. In the course of that walk, she met someone who provided exactly what she needed. She did not find her supply by searching. She found it by listening. Intuition often gives directions which seem unrelated to the problem at hand. This confuses the reasoning mind. But divine mind sees connections beyond appearance. When man insists on understanding before obeying, he blocks the path. Many ask how to distinguish intuition from fear. Fear is noisy, urgent, and exhausting. Intuition is calm, definite, and steady. Fear says, "What if?" Intuition says, "Go forward." One agitates, the other reassures. Intuition cannot operate in an atmosphere of resentment. Resentment clouds perception. Anger distorts judgment. This is why forgiveness is essential to guidance. When resentment is dropped, clarity returns. I have known people who lost opportunities simply because they delayed. They felt guidance but waited for confirmation. Confirmation never came, because confirmation follows obedience. Intuition is perishable. It must be acted upon when given. When intuition is followed, others notice an immediate change. The individual appears decisive without forceful assertion. He moves at the right moment. He escapes danger without explanation. People say, "You are fortunate." It is not fortune, it is guidance. I once knew a man who consulted everyone before making decisions. He feared mistakes and gathered opinions until he was paralyzed. When he learned to ask for one clear, intuitive lead and to follow it without discussion, his affairs improved rapidly. He said, "I feel gathered instead of scattered." Intuition gathers power. Intuition also governs speech. It tells one when to speak and when to be silent. Many difficulties arise from speaking at the wrong moment. The intuitive check prevents this. When obeyed, misunderstandings dissolve before they form. I often give this affirmation to strengthen trust in guidance. I am divinely led, and I make right decisions. When spoken faithfully, fear quiets and confidence returns. Repetition is essential, for old habits of doubt do not dissolve at once. Many were taught that inner guidance was dangerous, that trusting oneself was prideful. Yet humility is not mistrust. True humility is obedience to truth. When man denies the voice of divine intelligence within, he denies God's guidance, not his own. As intuition is honored consistently, life becomes simpler. Decisions require less effort. Regret disappears. Man no longer looks backward. He knows that each step is ordered. He begins to feel protected rather than anxious. The intuitive man is not impulsive. He does not rush. He waits inwardly and moves outwardly. This balance gives him authority. Others feel safe in his presence. They trust his judgment without knowing why. The magic path of intuition always leads to the promised land. Though it may wind through unexpected territory, the important thing is obedience. Each step taken in faith strengthens the next. Fear fades. I often suggest saying before sleep, "In the morning, I shall know just what to do." This impresses the subconscious with expectancy. Answers often come upon waking or during ordinary activity. They do not come while one is straining. Divine mind never leads man into danger, though it may lead him through appearances which seem uncertain. When the soul obeys, the way is made safe. Fear must be dismissed. Fear says, "Wait." Intuition says, "Move." As intuition becomes trusted, man ceases to envy those who seem fortunate. He understands that each is guided according to his own design. He does not attempt to follow another's path. He follows his own, and that path grows clearer each day. This restoration of inner guidance is one of the most important truths that was discouraged, not because it was false, but because it was effective. A guided man cannot be easily misled. An intuitive believer does not surrender responsibility. He accepts it. Yet, even intuition cannot operate fully where the soul clings, resists, or strives. Guidance requires openness, and openness is learned through the final truth which was softened over time. The true meaning of surrender, non-resistance, and casting the burden. For surrender was never meant to make man passive. It was meant to make him free. When a man has begun to trust the inner voice of divine intelligence and to follow its guidance without fear, he soon discovers another truth which was greatly misunderstood and therefore weakened the true meaning of surrender. Surrender was never meant to empty man of authority. It was meant to remove resistance. Yet over time, surrender was taught as submission, and submission bred helplessness rather than peace. Non-resistance is one of the most exact laws of life. It is not indifference, nor is it passivity. It is the refusal to give power to appearances which contradict divine order. When man resists a condition with fear, anger, or resentment, he binds himself to it. When he withdraws his resistance, the condition loses its hold and dissolves. The scriptures tell us, "Resist not evil." This was not an instruction to tolerate wrong, but a statement of law. Evil has no reality of its own. It exists only through belief and reaction. When man refuses to react, evil collapses from lack of support. Darkness does not fight the light. It disappears before it. Much suffering has come from misunderstanding this law. People believed they must endure hardship to prove devotion. They accepted struggle as virtue and strain as faithfulness. Yet divine mind knows no struggle. Order is effortless. Strain appears only when man fights law instead of aligning with it. I have seen resentment delay good for years. Resentment is resistance made active. It binds energy to the past and keeps old wounds alive. Many people rehearse injustices long after the event has passed, believing this rehearsal protects them. In truth, it imprisons them. I once knew a woman who felt she had been wronged repeatedly. She spoke often of unfair treatment and believed she was justified. Yet her life reflected constant opposition. When she learned to drop resentment and affirm instead, "Divine justice now operates in my affairs," the pattern dissolved. People changed. Conditions softened. The world responded differently because she had. Forgiveness is not moral obligation. It is spiritual intelligence. It releases energy which has been bound in resistance. When forgiveness is practiced, power returns to the present moment. Situations often resolve without effort once resentment is removed. Many were taught that forgiving meant approving wrong. This misunderstanding kept them bound. Forgiveness does not condone error. it dissolves it. Error cannot exist without attention and reaction. When both are withdrawn, it disappears. Casting the burden is the supreme act of non-resistance. It means acknowledging that outcome belongs to God, not to man. As long as man carries the burden, he interferes. When he releases it, law operates freely. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. This is instruction, not poetry. I often give this affirmation to those who feel overwhelmed. I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. When spoken with realization, it brings immediate relief. Relief is the sign that the burden has been transferred. If relief does not come, the burden has not yet been released. One must repeat the statement until peace is restored. I recall a man who worried incessantly over a business matter. He planned, argued, and imagined every possible failure. When he learned to cast the burden and refuse further discussion of the problem, his anxiety lifted. Shortly afterward, the situation resolved favorably, with far less difficulty than he had feared. The law had simply been waiting for him to step aside. Resistance often disguises itself as effort. People say, "I must make this happen." That statement alone reveals mistrust. God does not require assistance. He requires cooperation. Cooperation means alignment, not pressure. When man pushes, he blocks. When he releases, he allows. Non-resistance brings poise. The non-resistant person is not easily disturbed. He does not react. He responds. Others feel this steadiness and are influenced by it. There is authority in calmness. There is strength in quiet confidence. I have observed that when people stop fighting, life begins to fight for them. Obstacles remove themselves. Enemies become allies or pass out of the picture entirely. This is not coincidence. It is divine law operating without interference. Fear is another form of resistance. Fear resists good by expecting harm. Fear says, something will go wrong. Faith says, all is well. The law responds to the dominant expectation. When fear is indulged, it becomes prophecy. When it is denied, it dissolves. One must be especially watchful of fear, disguised as caution. Many say, I am only being careful, when in truth, they are being fearful. True caution is guided by intuition. Fear is restless and noisy. Intuition is quiet and sure. Non-resistance also applies to time. Impatience resists divine timing. When man insists that something must happen immediately, he often delays it. When he says, it comes at the right moment, under grace, the way opens. Divine mind knows no delay. Man introduces delay through hurry. I once knew a woman who longed to move from her surroundings and complained daily. Nothing changed. When she ceased complaining and affirmed, I am divinely placed, her attitude shifted. Within a short time, a perfect opportunity appeared. The change came when resistance ended. The body responds to non-resistance as faithfully as circumstances do. Tension creates congestion. Relaxation restores flow. Many ailments arise from holding on, holding fear, holding anger, holding resentment. When these are released, the body responds naturally. I often remind people that God fights their battles when they cease fighting them. The long arm of God reaches over people and conditions, adjusting and protecting. He need only manage his thought. As non-resistance becomes habitual, forgiveness becomes easy. Old grievances lose their charge. The past loosens its hold. This is freedom, and freedom is the natural state of the soul. Others will notice that you are no longer easily provoked. They may say you have changed. Indeed, you have. You have changed allegiance from fear to faith, from force to law. Your words carry weight. Repetition is essential in establishing this state. Old reactions do not dissolve at once. They dissolve through replacement. These statements are powerful when used faithfully. I am non-resistant to good. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. Divine order is now established in this situation. When man no longer resists, intuition flows freely. Guidance becomes clear. Decisions simplify. Life becomes less complicated. The unnecessary falls away. The essential remains. Thus, non-resistance prepares the way for the final restoration, the understanding of grace, not as helpless waiting, but as mastery through alignment. For living under grace was never meant to weaken man. It was meant to establish him, and it is to this final truth, the life lived under grace, in perfect ways, that we must now turn. When a man has learned to think rightly, to speak wisely, to follow guidance, and to cease resisting the law, he enters the state which the scriptures describe as living under grace. This state was perhaps the most misunderstood of all, for grace was gradually taught as helpless waiting instead of intelligent alignment. Yet grace was never meant to weaken man. It was meant to establish him. Grace is not exemption from law. Grace is harmony with law. Under grace, man does not escape responsibility. He fulfills it without strain. He no longer struggles against life, nor does he plead for mercy from circumstances. He understands that divine law is exact, kind, and unfailing, and that when he aligns with it, outcomes become inevitable. Many sincere believers were taught that grace meant enduring patiently, suffering quietly, and hoping for reward later. This teaching produced weariness rather than peace. Yet grace was never meant to postpone good. It was meant to make good natural. When man is under grace, effort gives way to order, and order replaces anxiety. The promised land spoken of in Scripture was never a distant country alone. It was a state of consciousness. The wilderness was the belief in lack, fear, and uncertainty. The journey was always inward before it was outward. The walls of Jericho did not fall through force or strategy. They fell through obedience and realization. The people did not attack the walls. They followed instruction and spoke from certainty, and the walls collapsed of their own weight. Every man has walls of his own, making walls built from old beliefs, fearful words, and mistaken teaching. These walls do not yield to struggle. They yield to understanding. I often give this affirmation to those who feel blocked. The walls of lack and delay now crumble away, and I enter my promised land under grace. When spoken with conviction, it changes the inner picture. One no longer sees himself pushing against barriers, but walking forward into open ground. This shift alone dissolves resistance. Living under grace means that man no longer fears change. He understands that divine mind cannot remove anything that belongs to him by divine right. What falls away was never part of his true inheritance. This realization brings freedom. Clinging ceases. Anxiety dissolves. Trust replaces vigilance. I have observed that those who live under grace carry themselves differently. Their movements are unhurried. Their voices are steady. They do not rush to explain or defend themselves. Others feel safe in their presence. Employers trust them. Friends rely upon them. Children sense calm. Authority radiates without force. This authority does not arise from pride. It arises from inner order. When the inner house is set in order, the outer follows naturally. Man no longer vacillates between hope and fear. Expectation becomes steady. He expects good as naturally as he once expected difficulty. The watchman at the gate must remain faithful even here. Living under grace does not mean drifting. It means mastery. Old fears may attempt to return, but they are met quietly with truth and dismissed. One does not argue with them. One simply refuses them entrance. In this way, peace remains undisturbed. I have often said that the game of life is a game of solitaire. No one plays against you. No one can defeat you. You are not in competition with another soul. You play only against your own beliefs. When those beliefs are aligned with divine law, the game becomes harmonious. There is no rivalry, no envy, no struggle, only unfolding. Many say, life is uncertain. Life is uncertain only to the uncertain mind. To the mind established in truth, life is orderly. Appearances may change, but law does not. The soul that understands this walks steadily, even when conditions shift. Under grace, man ceases to rehearse the past. He understands that forgiveness has wiped the slate clean. Old mistakes no longer stand as evidence against him. Error destroys itself when truth is accepted. This brings great relief. The future is no longer burdened by yesterday. Relationships also come into order under grace. Man no longer attracts confusion or discord. He attracts harmony because he is harmonious. He no longer fears abandonment because he is anchored in divine love. He no longer clings because he trusts. Trust draws. Fear repels. I have seen people transformed when they ceased saying, "Why does this always happen to me?" and began to say, "I am under grace." The pattern broke. Repetition ended. New experiences appeared. Grace replaced struggle. Repetition remains essential. Even at this stage, not repetition born of fear, but repetition born of joy and certainty. Truth is repeated because it restores balance, because it aligns the mind with order. These statements establish permanence. I am under grace and not under strain. Divine order governs my life. There is no loss in divine mind. When these ideas are impressed upon the subconscious, they become automatic. Reactions change. Expectations change. Life reflects it. Man no longer needs to remind himself constantly. The law operates smoothly. Living under grace also brings humility. Not the humility of smallness, but the humility of understanding. One recognizes that good is not personal achievement, but divine operation. Pride dissolves. Gratitude takes its place. Gratitude is the climate of the promised land. Where gratitude lives, abundance remains. Under grace, timing no longer alarms. If something has not yet appeared, one knows it is preparing. There is no panic and no hurry. Divine mind is never late. The soul rests, and in resting allows the law to complete its work. Others may ask how you remain so calm. You may not be able to explain it fully. Explanation is unnecessary. Demonstration is enough. Your life becomes the teaching. The greatest sign that one has entered the promised land is this: peace no longer depends on conditions. Peace remains, even while conditions change. This is mastery. This is freedom. The sacred teaching that was once obscured is thus restored, not as rebellion, not as defiance, but as completion. Faith is no longer blind. It is intelligent. Devotion is no longer exhausting. It is joyful. Obedience is no longer fearful. It is confident. What was removed was never power itself, but the understanding of how power works. And when understanding returns, authority returns with it. You were never meant to live as a dependent soul. You were meant to live as a conscious expression of divine intelligence, thinking rightly, speaking wisely, acting fearlessly, and trusting law. The truth does not ask you to abandon faith. It asks you to inhabit it fully. And when faith is restored to understanding, life responds, not slowly, not reluctantly, but naturally, for you are under grace. And under grace, all things move in perfect ways. I would like to leave you now, not with urgency, but with reassurance. Truth does not require haste. It requires recognition. When something real has been remembered, there is no need to grasp it tightly. It settles of its own accord, like dust after motion has ceased. You may feel quieter than when you began, and this quiet is not emptiness. It is alignment. Nothing has been taken from you that cannot be restored through understanding. Nothing essential has been lost. Truth is patient. It does not punish forgetfulness. It waits. And when the mind is ready, it returns not dramatically, but naturally, as though it had never been absent at all. You are not required to argue with anyone about what you have heard. Truth does not need defense. It proves itself through demonstration. When your thought changes, your speech steadies. When your speech steadies, your affairs follow. Others will notice, though they may not know why. They will say, "You seem calmer, more certain, more at ease with life." This is the outward sign of inward order. Do not attempt to carry all of this at once. Law works through simplicity. Choose one truth and live with it until it becomes natural. Speak it until it feels like your own language. Let it replace an old fear. That is enough. One law understood outweighs many ideas admired. Remember that the work is inward before it is outward. If nothing seems to change immediately, do not be disturbed. The unseen always moves first. When the root is corrected, the branch must follow. Impatience only asks the question twice. Trust answers it once. You are not meant to strain, to plead, or to prove. You are meant to align. When alignment is complete, effort becomes unnecessary. This is what it means to live under grace, not waiting helplessly, but standing knowingly within law. Should doubt attempt to return, meet it gently. Do not fight it. Replace it. Truth is not established through force, but through repetition. Speak again what you know to be true. The mind learns through familiarity. Peace comes when truth feels normal. You may find that certain passages of Scripture now read differently to you. Words once distant may feel practical. Instructions once softened may feel exact. This is not irreverence. It is restoration. Scripture was always meant to instruct life, not to remove it from reach. Above all, remember this. You are not separate from the law you are learning. You are its expression. The branch does not strain to be nourished when it remains in the vine. Nourishment is natural. I would leave you, then, not with warning, but with confidence. Life is not against you. It never was. It has only been answering you. And as your understanding deepens, the answers will grow kinder, clearer, and more orderly. Say often, quietly and without effort, I am under grace and not under strain. Let that be enough. And now, go forward not seeking truth, but allowing it to work through you.